general introduction of our panel. And once again, those of you who are just joining us, this is our virtual panel on Women on the Money, Women's History Month, the Harriet Tubman 20, and economic justice. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel, which includes
Mm,
a number of
mm.
Tubman history and commemoration specialists. So bear with me because each of the panelists gave me a nice, wonderful bio about who they are and what they're about. So first, I'm going to introduce each of the panelists alphabetically. So first is Karen Hill. After more than 30 years working in underserved communities on affordable housing development, including a federal appointment to implement the court's order to desegregate the city of Yonkers, Karen Hill was asked to protect and preserve Harriet Tubman's legacy and the 32-acre property in Auburn, New York. As president and CEO of the Harriet Tubman Home, Inc., Ms. Hill has led the effort to preserve Ms. Tubman's homestead. She successfully pursued federal legislation to have Harriet Tubman's homestead become one of the newest units of the National Park Service. The Harriet Tubman National Historical Park has the only extant resources related to the life and work of Harriet Tubman. A skilled negotiator, a seasoned construction and mortgage finance expert, Ms. Hill was called to ensure that generations yet unborn have the benefit of knowing the Moses of her people, Harriet Tubman. Ms. Hill was appointed by Senator Charles Schumer and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand to the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission. Prior to her Tubman experience, Ms. Hill was a program director for the National Urban League, chief executive of the Affordable Housing and Implementation Office, and chief executive of the American Homeowner Education and Counseling Institute. Ms. Hill also chaired the Nation Low Income Housing Coalition, the nation's largest advocacy and low income and affordable housing provider membership organization. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta, Order of the Eastern Stars, Prince Hall affiliation, the Links, and the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. She also is a graduate of Simmons College. Next is Barbara Ortiz Howard, who hatched the ambitious Women on the 20 campaign in March of 2015, sparking national discussion and creating the impetus behind the Treasury Department's decision to launch its own, the New 10 campaign in June 2015. Since the Treasury offered half of what was sought, Ortiz Howard continued the popular social media campaign to get the Treasury to change the 20, and not just the 10, a more fitting honor to women, the commemoration of their inclusion in the democracy with the centennial anniversary in 2020 of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote, and also an end to the tenure of a slave trader and slaughterer of Native Americans on the $20 bill. Due to the unanticipated input the Treasury received in 2015, they put off their decision until April 2016. Treasury answered the call of the campaign with three decisions to honor women, with Ortiz Howard, which is what Ortiz Howard refers to as the trifecta. So the change in currency, however, was derailed in 2017 when a new administration sided with keeping old hickory and old money. Ortiz Howard's advocacy continued throughout the 4 year stall, and in January 2021, this year, the Biden administration announced that they wanted to speed up the production of the Tubman 20s. Despite this hopeful announcement, there are some parts of the 2016 plan she wants upgraded, such as the complete removal of Jackson from the bill rather than simply relocating him to the back, where the story of Native Americans can be told. Ortiz Howard also wants more than five suffragists on the back of the new $10 bill, including more women of color. And she knows there will be no change in our currency until the Treasury can finally produce currency which has a raised tactile feature to comply with the American Disabilities Act. So she's working with the American Council for the Blind and others to accelerate this technology for the new currency designs. To support her activism, most days still start out for Ortiz House on a scaffold, inspecting and repairing building facades, balconies, and roofs, and overseeing operations for the exterior restoration company she started over 30 years ago in the New York City area. Undeterred by the challenges of being a woman in a male dominated field, Ortiz Howard enjoys her mission of taking care of people and their buildings. With the Women on the 20 campaign, she aims again to literally raise the profile of a woman in a male dominated field. Today, she is grateful for her family and the many people who believe in the W20 campaign as one that will highlight the extraordinary value women have had and will continue to represent on so many levels in our society. Our next panelist is Dr. Kaye Clifford Larson. Dr. Larson is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author of 3 critically acclaimed biographies, including Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, Portrait of an American Hero. She has consulted on feature film scripts, most recently Focus Features Harriet, starring Cynthia Erivo, documentaries, museum exhibits, animation and augmented reality productions, public history initiatives, and numerous publications. Her award-winning consulting work includes Maryland's Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State and National Historical Park, the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway and All-American Road, and the Harriet Tubman Home and National Park in Auburn, New York. Dr. Larson is frequently interviewed by local, national, and international radio programs and media outlets and has appeared on national and international television broadcasts, including BBC, PBS, and C-SPAN, also cable networks, and most recently CBS Sunday Morning. She is currently writing a biography of civil rights icon Fannie Lou Hamer entitled Walk With Me, due out from Oxford University Press this coming fall 2021. Finally, we have Dr. Kaye Whitehead, who is Associate Professor of Communication and African American Studies at Loyola University, Maryland, and the founding director of the Carson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice. Best known as the hashtag Black Mommy Activist, she is also the host of the award-winning radio show Today with Dr. Kaye on radio station WEAA. In 2020, Whitehead was selected by the Daily Record as one of Maryland's top 100 women and by the Baltimore Sun as the best radio host. In 2019, Whitehead received the Collegium Visionary Award from the College of Holy Cross, the Exceptional Merit in Media Award from the National Women's Political Caucus. The Baltimore Sun named her as one of Baltimore's 25 Women to Watch in 2019, and Essence magazine included her on the 2019 Woke 100 list of Black women advocating for change. Dr. Whitehead is the author of 4 books, including Race Brave, New and Selected Works, Notes from a Colored Girl, The Civil War Pocket Diaries of Emily Frances Davis, which received both the 2015 Darlene Clark Hine Book Award from the Organization of American Historians and the 2014 Letitia Woods Brown Book Award from the Association of Black Women Historians. Finally, also the Letters to My Black Sons, Raising Boys in a Post-Racial America. Dr. Whitehead is also the current president of the National Women's Studies Association. So please welcome everyone, our panelists. So to begin this discussion, I am going to open with a general question for the panel, and then I will direct specific questions to each of the panelists before we raise a final question directed at the whole panel again. And then afterwards, we will open up for general Q&A with the audience. And at least for audience members, during Q&A, you have 2 ways of raising your questions. One is to type out your question in the Q&A that's offered, as well as to either raise your hand so I can unmute you so that you can ask your question, through the audio mic. And also you have the chat to provide various comments in general, so that's also open for you as well. So we'll get started with our general question first pertaining to this subject, and that is I want to get into I guess it's become somewhat of a debate in a way because I'm actually reminded since today we started the trial of Derek Chauvin who had killed George Floyd. from last year, and that ignited a global Black Lives Matter movement. And I also remember last year for Ms. Magazine, I wrote an article that actually explored what it meant for George Floyd to have been arrested for a counterfeit $20 bill. And this is happening in a year when Harriet Tubman was supposed to have been on the $20 redesign, but that got delayed. So I kept going back and forth thinking of, wow, what would that have meant if Tubman was on the $20 when George Floyd was arrested for a counterfeit 20? There was
Mm.
that question. And then the other question is, well, the very fact that it was delayed, had a lot to do with this devaluation of Black lives, period. So I also was weighing that issue too of, well, he gets killed for a counterfeit 20 that was supposed to have featured Harriet Tubman anyway, and it wasn't featured because, well, you know why. So uh, the first question I want us to really grapple with, at least the whole panel, and that is putting Harriet Tubman on our currency an appropriate way to celebrate her legacy? So I think I will start with Dr. Kaye Whitehead. I know that you'll have to leave us around 4, so I want to get your comments in before you leave us.
So much, Janelle, for inviting me to be on the panel. I am just so excited to be here. I have never had a chance to thank Dr. Kate publicly, but she blurbed my first book, Notes from a Colored Girl. And so I just want to say, from so many years ago, having a young scholar get a blurb from you and just being so amazing in writing about my work really encouraged me. So thank you for being some of the shoulders that I stand on today. You don't know how much.
Thank you, Kaye. Thank you.
So I come to you here from Baltimore, where we are talking about what it means to be a Black woman at this time. What does it mean to uplift Black women? And as we sit here just 4 days or so from what they call Women's Equal Pay Day, when we're clear that that did not include marginalized women. For Black women, we don't catch up to the pay that a white man makes until August 3rd. So we're still grappling with trying to close the equal pay gap for Black women in this country. It is a very difficult time. I thought the same thing last year, Janelle, when George Floyd was murdered for passing a counterfeit $20 bill. I did not make the connection and think, well, if Harriet Tubman was on the $20 bill with Andrew Jackson on the other side, would that have changed things? No. Because it doesn't matter what bill you're passing. It doesn't matter whose face is on the sweaty currency. It's about the devaluing of Black lives across the board. I am really conflicted about Harriet Tubman as someone who saw her sister and brother traded for money, as someone whose labor was exploited from the time she was a child, as someone who not only stole herself for freedom, but she made sure that her family members and friends and others went with her, coming out of the heartbeat of the capitalist system that Dr. Ira Berlin calls being a slave society and not a society with slaves, putting her on the grubby, sweaty $20 bill in currency on the ground, passing hands, does not, in my opinion, lift up her legacy. Harriet Tubman, Moses, is someone I hold close to my heart. I am in Maryland. I know labor here in Maryland. And I think about ways that we honor and we situate Black women, their work, their labor, their lives, their sacrifice, and their commitment. And connecting someone who worked to tear down the establishment of capitalism, because that's what it is when you remove the capital means of production, which is removing bodies from being enslaved, to then celebrate her. Or one of the ways of celebrating her is putting her back onto a product that stands for the center of the capitalist system. The $20 bill, of course, is not the most circulated bill. The $100 bill is, but the $20 bill is one of the 3 most circulated bills. The idea that Harriet Tubman would be on the 20, I think we should think seriously about what does it mean for our lives and our faces and our images to be taken, to be captured, to be negotiated with, to be negotiated over. And does that change the impact of who she was and who she will continue to be for legacies and children and generations that come after all of us that are sitting here?
All right, thank you for that perspective. Do any of the other panelists want to respond directly to that or to my question specifically?
Well, this is Karen, and I have the day-to-day responsibility for protecting, preserving, and advancing the legacy of Tubman. And I have a slightly different view than Dr. Whitehead. I would hope that uh, folk would really spend some time getting to know Harriet in the last 50 plus years of her life in Auburn, where she grappled with our capitalist system, understood it, and was constantly determining ways in which to participate in it and overcome it. That's how she was able to acquire 32 acres of land. That's how she was able to feed so many and house so many people. And she understood that as a landowner, she really wanted to be a property owner. That was just very a fundamental for Harriet, that she was being taxed but wasn't being represented. And so she really understood the value of currency, the system of taxation, how women were being devalued. That's how she became largely involved in the suffragist movement. But she also knew she needed medicine. She needed money to buy medicines for the thousands of people, Black, white, all whom she provided free health care. She knew that the indigent former slave needed to be able to age in dignity and grace, which is why she developed on the property 9 cottages, which became the home for the indigent Negro, the home for the aged, one of which remains today. And that's why she refused to allow the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, to whom she bequeathed her legacy, again, understanding the value of land and ownership, to the AME Zion Church, but she refused to allow the church to charge those coming into the home $100 in order to come into the home. So she was keenly aware of everything associated with money, but she knew it was a part of the fabric of America. Okay. And I think that that's what needs to be recognized. And are we ever going to get like a perfect straight line answer to, is it good or is it bad? Probably not. But I think that from my experience in working across issues of housing affordability, across issues of higher education, and particularly with HBCUs, and so many of whom are, yes, we have Kamala Harris at Howard, and that's a wonderful thing, but so many HBCUs are so marginalized in terms of their resources to help their student bodies. We know that there's an opportunity for campaigns, not dissimilar to the kind of campaign that Harriet would want to support, for economic empowerment for us as a people. And I'm speaking as women, but for us as Black people, to make more conscientious decisions on how and where we choose to spend our resources. To me, that is one of the primary takeaways with her being on the 20, is that people stop and think, is this a need or is it a want? Is it advancing my goal, my family goal? Is it advancing the institutions that I care about? And it makes us all more responsible in that. Now, that's a big part of my takeaway, as I have families and individuals who come to the Tubman home, who step on it, a hallowed property, and that's one of the first things they want to know is, how can they get to the currency? That's one of their big questions. Do we have it? When is it coming? So there is a hunger for it, but how can we help um, guide that process in a way that it becomes a meaningful opportunity for economic advancement.
I'd like to follow up on what Karen just said too. You were talking about a campaign to educate people. I think that a lot of people don't understand that when a new currency is released, the Federal Reserve also releases an education campaign to go along with the currency. And so when they finally decide the date that the Tubman currency will be released, that's when we all have this opportunity to contribute to an education campaign and demand that it's beyond just Tubman's history. It's her legacy, what her values are, and how that can be a huge conversation, because the power of the Federal Reserve is going to be part of that campaign. It goes into every K through 12 classroom. I mean, it's huge. And because we haven't had a currency released in a long time, no one knows that that has to happen. So it's a huge opportunity for us to just carry on amazing conversations to move this forward.
And I'll add that, 6 years ago, 2015, when we launched this campaign, after we announced in about a week from now, it'll be 6 years, that Harriet Tubman won. She was the most Googled person on the internet. People wanted to find out more, and it was a curiosity. And this has become a way into the conversation of all these things that have come up. Even this conversation, whether it's right to have her on the bill, has been an evolution of this conversation, which we've never had. It's been a way in to explore the racism in this country. It's a way in to explore the true history in this country. And when there is a Tubman 20 and some young child in Texas says, why is Harriet Tubman on this $20 bill? The teacher will have to say, why? Not the excuses, not the kinds of things that those school boards restricted to. So it allows for more conversation and more honesty and truth. And we need to have, in addition to what Dr. Whitehead said and what Brittany Cooper's pointed out, was very significant conflicts. There is we'd rather have the money than be on the money. And those are not mutually exclusive. Those things need to come together. And I think Karen touched on that. Those things have to come together. You have to have cultural reparation alongside of economic. And I think they aid each other. They support one another and help everyone get on board with that kind of program.
Okay, thank you for saying that. I'm going to come back to Dr. Whitehead. Thinking on the issues you raised about your concern about Harriet Tubman, and having her appearance on the $20 redesign, I wanted to know more about, as a historian and also as NWSA president, what do you think is the most important lesson from Harriet Tubman's history as it relates to Women's History Month, the field of women's studies, and also to this issue of economic justice?
Thank you, Janelle, and thank you for all the comments. I really do appreciate the discussion. I don't want to see it as whether it's right or it's wrong. I do just think it's complicated. And I think that we all wrestle with who Harriet Tubman was and is for us, even if you don't know Harriet Tubman's total history. I mean, as a former middle school teacher, having to help my students move from, Harriet Tubman as Moses, to Harriet Tubman involved in the Civil War, to Harriet Tubman as nurse and soldier, to Harriet Tubman taking care of her parents, to Harriet Tubman marrying a younger man because you can get access to military funds like this. One of the amazing things about Harriet Tubman versus a Dr. King or even, Medgar Evers, is that Harriet Tubman lived a long life. I mean, we were able to see stages of Harriet Tubman as the country changed. We can use her life to talk about how the country changed. So I don't think it's a right or wrong thing. And I sit here, not just as a president of NWSA, thinking about women's studies, and not just as someone who's a Black women's historian who focuses on the 19th century. I also sit here as the secretary of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life, Carter G. Woodson's organization. And that fact that we're now talking about how Harriet Tubman can be used as a lens to get us into a conversation about racism, we've been doing that with Negro History Week since 1926. Like, if white folks are not into a conversation about African-American history today, then trust me, having Harriet Tubman on the 20 won't get us there. Harriet Tubman on the 20 will not get folks in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Nevada to start talking about Black history in a way around equity and justice that we haven't already done. I mean, Black Lives Matter last summer, after the murder of George Floyd, for a lot of people, that was the amazing Black Lives Matter global movement. For many of us, it was Black Lives Matter 2.0, because we had already done the work talking about Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown that white folks didn't want to have. So, you know, this reawakening is a little bit disturbing. So that aside, when I look at the life of Harriet Tubman and I wrestle with it, I start to think about, you know, there's so many ways that Harriet Tubman's legacy has been disturbed, has been changed, has been lied about. This is why I really respect the work you're doing, Karen, because the mythology around Harriet Tubman is something that we have to fight against. So she was everywhere doing everything. She was larger than life, rather than looking at the complexity of who she was and the lessons that she left for us that we can then follow. That Harriet Tubman is not someone like it's Jesus Christ, Harriet, and Gandhi that you can never be. That Harriet Tubman has lessons for us where we stand at this moment, from being minty to standing up to changing her name to say, I'm going to leave you even if you don't come with me, husband. I'm going to go and live my life and be the fullest person that I can be, and then pick up struggles along the way. So I think it's complicated. Do I want Harriet Tubman, someone I revere? So when I look, I mean, when I think about Moses, I don't want Harriet Tubman on the grubby, sweaty 20, but I understand that for a number of people, maybe it's the grubby, sweaty 20 that will get them talking about Harriet Tubman, but I dispute that. Because if you're just going to start talking about Harriet Tubman on the 20, I mean, I Googled Harriet Tubman just the other day, just to check, and she's still one of the figures that, you know, when you put Harriet Tubman, Barack Obama as the most Googled, people have a better idea of who she is, not just because she's on the 20. Even the movie Harriet got people talking about it. So I just think the $20 bill and the commodification, once again, of Black women, our images being used and disputed and discussed. And it's not even Harriet Tubman alone. Like, I just still can't get beyond the fact that we still have Andrew Jackson on the back. That until that's
it's gotta go.
Yeah, that has to go.
Yeah, we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, totally.
a couple.
I think I can't hear
I
Dr.
can't hear
Whitehead.
you, Dr. Whitehead. Go
Dr.
ahead.
Whitehead, you got excited and something
Yeah.
on your end went off for a bit.
Yeah,
Well, you know, one of the things that I found really striking last year that was like such a disappointment is because of COVID. You know, we had to close the park, and so many of the people, and I will say specifically young people who participated in marches across the country, were emailing us saying, "Are you open? Can you open?" And you know, sadly, we had to say, no, we're not open because of COVID. But some of those young people still came to Auburn in campers, because you can see the site from across the street. And we would hear back like, we know you weren't going to be open, but we just had to come and see. You know, and some of them have been in touch with us again this spring saying, we're coming back again in the summer so we can step on the grounds and soak it all in. And I think, you know, this past weekend, I think Cynthia Revo was on a program, and she talked about, you know, they were lauding the movie, and she said, but that's just the first part of Harriet's life. Get to know the second part of Harriet's life. It is so much more than, you know, the movie. You end up feeling heroic, and at that point, she had not been inducted into the military intelligence corps of the army. You know, so now they take this woman who they thought was a simpleton, if I could use their phrasing, and now they lift her up as a huge champion of having the emotional intelligence and just the ability to grapple with complex issues in the military. And now she's much, much lauded within the whole military space. But beyond that, this is a woman who had nothing. And I think that this is the core. She started with no resources, and she had to figure out a way in which to support her family first, her faith factor. Her faith was just unbelievable. You can't have a discussion about Harriet Tubman and not put at the top of that list where her faith came in. Okay, her faith was unbelievable. And even Frederick Douglass recognized that while he had such access, all the access in the world to the leaders of this country, that access was afforded to him because of the work of Tubman, the empirical work of Tubman on the value of freedom. So there, value was something that Tubman was keenly aware of in all the different spaces that she participated. And I think if Harriet were talking to us today, she would say, I speak mostly from the community of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, to whom she bequeathed her legacy. She would say, church, how do we now use that opportunity to help undergird those things that we say we believe in? Everyone ought to be decently housed. We should not have issues of food insecurity. We should be really making sure that all of our seniors are well provided for. And what can we do to help deal with our health challenges? Because Tubman, as you said, she lived for 91 years of age. This is a woman who was keenly aware of taking care of her vessel. That there are so many issues that people should be challenged with anytime they come into contact with that $20 bill. They should be, we think constant contact is something. That $20 bill ought to be able to help people say, do I need another pack of cigarettes? Okay, should I spend my money in this store that doesn't respect me or my people? There are so many challenges to this is an opportunity to redirection, or press the reset button. And I don't want us to lose it. I don't want us to lose it because also, at least on the frontage of the bill, it has been very reverently designed. We participated mightily in every opportunity with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing around that redesign. And we have artifacts from her homestead embedded within the design. And moreover, Tubman would want to be a part of what takes the ADA community out from the margins and into the mainstream in terms of use of currency. And we ought not forget that. And really, our challenge now is to not allow the banking system that would have to recalibrate all of their counting machines, not just in the US and globally, not to drag their feet. We have a lot of advocacy issues, okay, that we have to confront. You have education issues, advocacy issues. We've got to advocate to have the Federal Reserve to begin to order less currency so that the Tubman currency sees the light of day. Because as Kate was saying, when the currency has its reveal, it will then go back into sequestration for another 6 months, and it will only be put into use if there are no more Andrew Jacksons around. And this may be our way to drive him out. Okay, this may be our campaign to drive him out.
Yeah, and that would be perfect too, driving out Andrew Jackson the way he drove out the Native Americans.
Absolutely.
Let's think about the history. I'm also thinking of representation. I believe representation matters, so I'm always thinking of opportunity, because obviously the reason why the Tubman 20 was delayed had everything to do with representation representation. I mean, the previous administration dragged their feet. They were not having it, which
Right.
means that if that previous administration did not want Harriet Tubman on the 20, obviously that represented some kind of power, some kind of
Mm.
shift that they were not prepared for. So I tend to not see putting Harriet Tubman on the 20 as necessarily an issue of, setting us back or even commodification. And I think we need to be careful with that too, because, it's very easy for us to immediately jump into Black women's bodies or objectify, but we never say that about the white men, all the white men who are on the currency. I mean, the Broadway musical Hamilton saved Alexander Hamilton on the 10. They were actually planning to remove him to put Ronald Reagan on that currency. So I think that representation is kind of important, right? But my next question is actually going to be to Barbara Ortiz Howard, since you started the campaign. I would like to get a little bit more from you on why did you start that campaign? Considering that people are kind of split about, is that an appropriate way to honor women's history, and also what were some of the most surprising developments that came out of it, including when Harriet Tubman was selected.
Right. Well, thank you. And it's, it's just really such an honor to be with you all here today. I am so touched and to see you all again. It's very important to me. So the campaign started because, back in the day, I, I marched, for civil rights, women's rights, Vietnam War, and the war, got tear gassed, and various things, and fought to wear pants to school, all these things. Nixon resigns, we got Roe v. Wade, we got the Civil Rights Act. I think we're good. I go to work. I raise a family. I do the baseball mother thing, the soccer thing, but I'm raising my daughter. I'm like, where's the representation? Who am I showing her, as being? And then I also saw this movie, Iron Jawed Angels, which was about Alice Paul and the women who were trying to get the right to vote. And I had never heard of her. And I thought, I knew about women's history a little bit. I mean, the history that we're taught is so limited, but it was very shocking to me. It was actually like a kick to the gut. And I said, well, we really need to lift women up. I don't know how. And then it just came to me. I was in a Starbucks, of course, and getting my coffee. And I looked at my money and I said, wait a minute, it's all men. That's the problem. We only have men here. And I spoke to some people in the store. I said, why don't you take this up? You're young, you can do this. And then I don't know women in the, women historians or educators. And I'm like, how would I get this going? But since I asked other people, other organizations, why don't you take this up for the centennial? This is 2012. And everybody else had a full agenda, what they were planning. So I asked a few friends if they would join, and we said, let's form this in the form of like an election. Like we'll have a caucus period. We'll see who sends us names. We reached out to Darlene Clark Hines. We reached out to all these different people to try to submit names to us. We got over 100 names, and we ranked the women on, we had these same people rank the women that we had on the level of what their contribution to society was and the level of difficulty that they had to achieve it. They got a weighted score, and they progressed from 100 to 60 to 30. And when we had 15, we presented that to the public. We said, give us your top 3. And then so we had like 2 rounds of voting. We had the top 3, and we also added Wilma Mankiller because it was March Madness. We had to have the Final 4. So, and that also gave a lot more visibility to Wilma Mankiller than if she had been in a contest with 15 other people, which was already highly competitive. And of course, was Rosa Parks, Eleanor Roosevelt, Wilma Mankiller, and Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman won that hands down. And we were, ecstatic. We were Frederick Douglass Boulevard, 120th Secondary. We're giving out Tubman 20s. We're all excited. We printed them out. And we presented it to the Treasury Department. And they said, yes, come on down. We're really excited. We're going to have, we want to have women on currency. I'm like, oh, that's great. And at first I thought the same thing, like, should women be on money? There's a disconnect between women and money, by the way. It's like, maybe it's not the right thing. Money's, but you need it. Harriet Tubman realized you need money so that you can compete and you can do the things that you want to do and redefine the capitalism. But so we went down there and they told, well, we're going to have a woman on the 10 though. You'll come on board with that, right? I said, well, yeah, that's great. You could have women on 10s, but we are women on 20s because it is so much more used around the world. 2/3 of our currency is used outside of the United States. And this will be a big message to the whole world. We have to have the 20s. We're women on 20s. And that started a 9-month conversation. And it was great. And that was the biggest surprise. And it was the most rewarding surprise that we could have these kinds of conversations. Who was Harriet Tubman? What did she do? She basically made the Union possible by doing the courageous things that she did, by being a spy, by leading a battalion down into the Combahee. She was the one who recruited soldiers, and she did these heroic acts and brought this country together. And, of course, she continued to do many things after that, but she made the foundation for the Union by doing those things in the war. And so that was, and now to even have this conversation, the same conversation 6 years later, and going to what Karen was talking about in terms of the ADA, and Treasury is under an injunction. They cannot do a new redesign unless they have meaningful access for the visually impaired, which would have been a priority for Harriet Tubman. And I think that's an important story to bring out, and they came out with now a status report. They're going to do an intaglio versus an embossed, which is not very useful. It will wear out. It's just lip service. The blind are not happy with it. It's not a meaningful access. Other countries, Australia, England, actually 180 other countries have meaningful access to currency, and we don't. So that's
and that's also yes, and that's also related to Harriet Tubman, who herself was disabled, in terms of the seizures that she suffered throughout her life. So I think that's also an important piece that you're mentioning. So I'm glad that that's something that you are bringing up. Let me move forward because I want to also make sure we have time for our audience to offer Q&A. So I'm just going to have one final question before I open up to the general my final question for the whole panel again. So I'll ask Kate Larson since I haven't heard much from you. And this question is about your role as a prominent Tubman biographer. So what do you think are the greatest misconceptions about the life of Harriet Tubman, and how can the 20 redesign actually help to address this?
Well, there are so many amazing things about her that people have misconceptions about, but I'd like to link these comments to the design of the $20 bill, and that has to do with the disability issues. And as you said, Janell, she was disabled herself. She suffered from epileptic seizures, and it was a very difficult, this is something she lived with for her whole life, every single day. But she also could not read or write formally, read letters or write letters. So literacy was an issue, but I think that everybody needs to know that she was an incredibly literate woman because she had other forms of literacy, and she had visual literacy. She could see things and interpret things. She could read the night sky. She could read a field. She could read the forest. She could read a tree. She could read human beings and figure out that person is not safe, that person might be dangerous, or that's someone I might be safe with. So there are other forms of literacy, and telling that part of her story, that she did so many amazing things a woman who could not read or write, but it did not stop her from accomplishing amazing things. And so I also think that while everyone seems to know who Harriet Tubman is, you know, most Google person, etc., I would like to see her viewed as a real human being, a woman who was born and raised in the most incredibly difficult circumstances, but she had a family that she loved. She had life experiences that people think they know, but they don't. And I want them to know every part of her life. She grows up, her parents struggle to keep that family together, and they can't be together, but somehow they were able to educate their daughter in ways that she saved other people's lives. She becomes this amazing spy and scout during the Civil War. You know, like, where did that come from? Well, it came from this, 30 years of education that she received from her community, her parents, from people that she met in the North. These are things that I would like everyone to know, so that the young budding activist in your community today might have feelings of confidence if they can overcome some of the obstacles that they have in their lives, because Harriet Tubman did too. She isn't a cardboard character that was all of a sudden grown and on the Underground Railroad and running around, and she was a person who grew up and became who she was. And so I think that those are the things that I want people to learn about her. Having her on the currency will contribute to that. It's still a process that we all have to contribute to. We're still learning more about Harriet Tubman. I mean, Karen Hill brought up the point that the United States Army Military Hall of Fame, Intelligence Hall of Fame, has now inducted her into their Hall of Fame as a real, actual spy. And that's huge. That's huge. That wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. So, and so to have this Black woman on their Hall of Fame, their wall of fame, I wanted to inspire little girls around the country, around the world, because that currency of ours is going to go around the world.
Yes.
And the fact that, and Karen Hill talks about this, her values, 50 years she spent in Auburn, New York, taking care of her family, being part of a community there. She was an entrepreneur. She was an incredibly faithful woman who belonged to the Amy Zion Church. These are things.
Just a minute. Sorry to interrupt you, Kate, but I just wanted to acknowledge, because Kaye Whitehead does have to sign off.
Oh,
He has a radio show to go to, so thank you for being
sorry.
a part of our panel.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Bye,
Whitehead.
Kaye. Bye, Kaye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kate.
That's okay. So I was just going to wrap it up anyway. I just think these are the things that we need to value about Harriet Tubman. And, we need heroes like her. We need people in our historical past that we can look to as models for our future.
Okay.
Janell, may I just say something? I know I've been
Go
talking
ahead,
a lot,
Yeah.
but I feel like, and Kate and I have talked about this a lot. Well, first, let me say, this is a part of the re-education of all of us to Harriet Tubman, because we were very much unserved by the 250 plus books written about Tubman before scholarly work, before Kate's book came on board. So all of us were made aware of Tubman in ways that combine fact and fiction, that made her sort of a mystical character. And now we're being re-educated to exactly the depths of this woman, all the different parts of her life that she used every century of her life, every decade of her life, to make a difference. And if you come to the Tubman home, you'll see this incredible timeline from the cradle to the grave of what was happening in American history, what was happening in world history, and the differences that Tubman was making through the decades. And so, this is, when I see we have like sort of a controversy, it's because this is all a part of the re-education. A lot of the people who don't support her being on currency don't really know Harriet. It's just the idea of Harriet. And I understand and I appreciate that. But one of the things I'm most concerned with, the fact that we always have to fight so hard for Harriet all the time. And we don't recognize that there would be no Douglas, no King, if they didn't have the shoulders of Harriet to stand on. We don't give her credit for the fact that she was foundational in terms of launching our civil rights, okay, forward in a way in which it said we have to have economic justice at the same time as we have these human rights. I mean, we don't do that. We don't recognize that enough. And we don't challenge men. Okay, should a man be on this? We only feel like we have a right to challenge when it's Harriet. And thanks be to God. And I'll say it, I am glad it's Harriet. I'm glad she's an African-American woman. She's from Western Africa, of the Ashanti tribe.
Yeah,
and she's of a darker hue with a broad nose and crinkled hair. We have to come to terms with who we are as a country and get to know this woman, because she really related back to her continent in so many ways. That's how she was driven. And as far as her being a member of the Amy Zion Church, yes, she was. But she visited many different churches. She was open to that. I mean, this is a woman who just took life in and figured out her path in it and how to get there. Okay. I'm going to stop because I know, Janell, you've got time constraints, because I could go for the rest of the day.
Well, I think we could all talk about Harriet Tubman for quite some time, but I appreciate the comments, really. And this is the final question I'm posing to the panel before I ask the audience to weigh in. And so you brought up the issue of economic justice, and this is my final question, since I also have economic justice in the panel title. So I want us to think about why some have expressed genuine concern that the Tubman 20 would just be a token gesture, a kind of way to feel nice about being diverse and inclusive, instead of addressing deeper issues like slavery reparations, for example, or gender pay equity. So I just want all of us to think about, how might we leverage a symbolic act like a Tubman 20 to address issues of economic justice, especially impacting on race and gender?
It certainly puts it front and center, literally and figuratively. Goldman Sachs just announced an initiative to contribute $10 billion to Black women-owned businesses and organizations. And that has been driven not by the Tubman 20, but by this entire evolution and movement and awareness, acknowledgement and awareness, that leads to conversation, which leads to honesty and reconciliation, and then reparations. And there's a whole spectrum of work that has to be done. And that's how it's connected. I think that we have this awareness and all these associated topics, that we are not only a sexist and racist country, but we are a very ableist country. And Harriet Tubman is somebody who redefines those things. This is, no, it's all of us. It's all of us. This is not, as Heather McGee pointed, this is not a zero-sum game. This is something we can all win at.
Right.
Well, for my own part, I tend to be just very pragmatic. I'd like to see all of our HBCUs well endowed, okay, to do their work And this is an opportunity in a targeted way to make that happen. I'd like to see us not have to continue to grapple with food insecurity. How can we use this currency to help that illness go away, that we allow people to go hungry day after day in this country. And I think that we have, why is it that most African Americans have the majority of their wealth tied up in the ownership of a home, which they then have to use to start their own businesses and to send their kids off for higher education, but they don't have the diversified portfolio that whites have. Goldman Sachs can give that kind of money, but let's get into what needs to happen to help that kind of economic security and diversity happen. And we see more women today of every stripe buying their own homes as single women. How do we undergird that and support that? I think there just are real dynamic opportunities for this $20 bill to make a difference if we put out the white papers combined with the actions to say this can be transformative. This is not, I don't see this as just sort of the photo app. It happens and it goes away. No, the same way this is our infrastructure bill to make a difference.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is our infrastructure bill to make a difference. How do we galvanize that movement and make a difference? How do we do that? I mean, that's what I see. That's what I see.
And I'd like to add to that, Karen, that we still need to address the issue of educational inequities in urban areas and rural areas. People cannot get out from under if they don't have access to good education. And it isn't just the HBCUs, it's starting with preschool. We need to have preschool for
everybody, universal.
Everybody. It should be universal pre-K, preschool for everyone. We have to do that. Tubman was a huge proponent of education. She wanted all of her nieces and nephews to be educated. She knew that that was the path to economic advancement. So there are so many issues that could be advanced because of Harriet Tubman on the 20.
Right. And let's not forget how she was a champion of the trades. I mean, the masonry work that her nephews learned from her second husband. I mean, we need to figure out everybody has worth and value. I mean, I think that's a fundamental. Everybody has worth and value. Those institutions have to be in place so that we're not losing young people. I think STEM and STEAM are great and terrific, but for people who have other gifts, we need to fortify those institutions as well, so that everybody can use their gift. What is America afraid of? Succeeding?
That's a
Okay.
That's a really good question. And I also think, well, obviously, with the new administration, we're moving forward on the Tubman 20. So to me, it's not even an issue for debate. It's happening.
Yes.
The previous administration tried to stop it, but it's happening now. So I think the question, not even so much a question, but it might be the vision that we now need is to think about, well, with Harriet Tubman appearing on the 20, how do we use that? As I said, how do we leverage that for other issues, And I really think that's really helpful, Karen, when you talk about an infrastructure. I'm thinking an infrastructure for gender pay equity, as well as an infrastructure for slavery reparations, and to actually be able to point to, see Harriet who's on the 20. Yeah, let's talk about that legacy, and let's talk about how do we address inequality. I see there's potential. And so I appreciate all of the panelists, weighing in. I'm sorry, Dr. Kaye Whitehead had to leave us, but she did raise some important points too, in terms of, holding these issues in contention. So with that, I am going to
Can I just add one point to what you were talking about, Janell? Like, it is critical that we push and we pull all the allies together to make this happen in this administration. We cannot allow it to go beyond December 31st, 2024.
Mhm.
2026 is their target for putting out the $10 bill. 2028 is the target date for the 5, and 2030 is their target date for the 20. That does us no good. It does us no good for security. You brought up the thing about George Floyd. That is a failure of Treasury not to pick up, not to have security in our money. You know, George Floyd was not a counterfeiter.
Mhm.
Round up the counterfeiters, round up the counterfeit bills, put
Mhm.
in circulation good 2020 Tubman 20s and other money. And
Mhm.
let's stop this. They haven't redesigned this since 2003. So this is all a security risk.
Mhm.
Well, raised tactile feature will add to security.
Mhm.
And this has to happen. We can come up with a vaccine in a year. We can put a rover on Mars. We can do all these things if we have the will. Right now, there is no will because they're like, oh, they're asleep on, you know, like we need a new factory. We need a new place to put no, we have to put the pressure on them to come up with this now and not to do just lip service to the visual.
Mhm.
They have to come up with a, you know, real access that's meaningful to them.
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I just want to.
All right, thank you for saying that. So, yes, as I mentioned, I want to open up now to those of us who are still in attendance. As I mentioned, you can raise your questions either in the Q&A or if you want to raise your hand and I can unmute you if you have a comment or question. So, right now, let's see. Looks like I have there are 3 questions actually in the Q&A, so I'll just go through these. So, all right, so the first question is from Tarana. Hi, Tarana, one of my former students. Having Tubman on the bill, will it make any difference in changing attitudes and bias on racial issues? Is it going to be a drop in the lake? Um, that's the first question.
Well, I'll speak up. I don't think it'll be a drop in the lake. I think it's going to be effective in ways that we can't even imagine right now. And if we don't, I think it's a lost opportunity, a huge lost opportunity. And think of the generations to come that can benefit. I want my little 2-year-old grandsons to grow up with Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. I do.
Mhm.
Simple.
Okay. Anyone else wants to answer that question?
Well, I think if Harriet, when she becomes the face of the $20 bill, we should all personally feel challenged. What are we doing?
Mhm.
You know, I think one of the things that as you get to know more about Harriet, it is less about what everybody else is doing. It's more, Harriet was always about what am I doing to make a difference? And
Mhm.
so we have to govern ourselves in such a way that we create the space to create the linkages to the things that we care about to make a difference with the $20 as a backdrop. It won't be a drop in the lake if we all become active,
Right.
if we all participate. It only becomes a drop in the lake if everybody else is waiting to see what's different now, and they sit home.
Mhm.
And you know what? That speaks to Tubman's legacy and her history because of the abolitionists that she met after she left Maryland. She demanded that they do more. They talked a really good game, but some of them didn't move beyond their little space. And she was so powerful that she drove some of them to step up their game and to work harder. That's what she did. She asked herself every day, what could she do more? She asked them to do more as well. So if we look at Tubman on the 20, we could ask ourselves every day, like Karen says, what are we going to do? What am
Okay.
I going to do? Yeah.
Yes. All right. Here's our next question from Gabriella, another student of mine. What were some of the historical implications that you have encountered while preserving the memories and the contributions of Harriet Tubman? It doesn't look like it's directed at any specific panelists. So if any of you want to respond,
What are the implications?
what are some of the historical implications that you have encountered while preserving the memories? Hmm.
Well, she's very different from Fred. She was very different from
Okay.
Frederick Douglass. I think Kate and I, kind of went through this process when, you know, I noticed in your TED piece that you had the image of the young Tubman on the screen, and that, you know, going through the process of authenticating that photo, which because there was so few images or no images of Tubman as a young person. And whereas Douglas was photographed every time he got up to speak, you know. I mean, it just, I mean, these things have been going on for centuries, how women sort of take care of the work that they're doing, and they're always thinking about images and how they're being portrayed, and what, you know, she held herself back so that she could go further. But Douglas, he wanted everything chronicled, absolutely everything chronicled. So, you know, she had a really different perspective, and I think she lived to be 91 years of age because she kind of took it all in. Of what do I need to do to be here for as long as I possibly can and make every day count. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway when I started doing this work with Tubman is that, you know, she literally did not grow weary or tired in well-doing. She took, you know, she had such a literal sense of that she had value, and that she needed to quantify that value in a way that served humankind. Now that's just amazing when you think the system she's come out of, that her biggest impact was serving all of humanity. I mean, that's a generosity of spirit that I can't say I possess, but she certainly lived her life that way, with that example. And with that, that's why her death was chronicled by the New York Times, because they knew she had done something extraordinary, and extraordinary work. And we've all been trying to understand, where did that capacity come from? You know, where did that capacity to provide healthcare and food to whites who did not treat you very well, didn't treat you well at all, but you knew that they needed to be cared for and nurtured? Where did that capacity come from? Versus, I'm just going to take care of me and mine, and the heck with everybody else.
You know, you were talking about Frederick Douglass and all of the photographs that he took, because he definitely had his legacy in mind. I would say Harriet Tubman did too, to some extent, because we do have a few photographs of her. Because when you were talking, I actually was thinking of the photograph that was taken of her. Was it like 1911? With the elderly.
The
Harriet
elderly,
Tubman,
yes, the elderly
all
Tubman, but
white.
Right.
And also what always struck me with that picture is she's so diminutive, and yet her hands are so huge. And I always think of, well, they do say people with huge hands are very generous people, and that's how she lived her life. I also think of the photograph that was discovered recently in 2017 that popped up around the time when people were foolishly asking stupid questions like whether or not she was pretty enough to be on our campus.
yeah, well, that was
Well,
horrible.
And
you
then
know,
it's
That
like
was
she just
horrible.
came out with this new photograph. It's like, you want pretty, you want elegant, here you go. I just think, you know, I think she was paying attention.
And then I think there's just something really, that we haven't done this work yet, but there's something incredible when you think of Tubman, Douglas, who got his preaching credentials from the Amy Zion Church in New Bedford, and Sojourner Truth, who changed her name from Isabella Pumphrey to Sojourner Truth at the altar of the Mother Amy Zion Church, the denominational home. There is something that needs to be further explored about this church that we historically call the Freedom Church, but something in its essence that allowed these three individuals to zealously pursue freedom in every way imaginable. You know, I mean, there's just, so we could go on, Janell, for hours and hours and hours. There's so much more to be explored. But the one thing I will not continue to explore is the fight for Harriet's legitimacy.
Yes.
Because she is foundational. She is foundational in this country and in my mind's understanding of how we were able to lift ourselves up through the whole civil rights struggle. And Kate's book on Fannie Lou Hamer is going to reveal the next chapters and all of that to all of us. But I just think we should not forget there would be no Martin. I mean, you know, I get so discouraged when people really begin with Martin and Rosa Parks, and they have, there's so much that they've done that's incredible. But if it wasn't for Harriet, where would we be?
Okay, I want to get through some of these other questions. So, Corin Field, this is her question. Wonderful panel, thank you. Could you each reflect on how the design and rollout for the 20 can work to encompass the full length of Tubman's life and the later stages of her activism in particular? Do you think ageism intersects with racism and sexism to slow this effort? How does age fit into all this?
Well, I could speak a little bit to that, and Karen might be able to address it as well as Barbara, but I think knowing what the design, the foundation of the design is, then Karen mentioned how there are so many respectful things that have been put into the design that are part of Tubman's life, and there is symbolism and there's importance to all of that. And that stuff will be revealed when the design is revealed. So there'll be great conversations that about the symbolism in the note itself that spans her entire lifetime from birth till death. So that's one part of it. And I just think that well, you can go on to somebody else. I'll collect my thoughts more on that. But I think people have to understand it's just not her head, and it's more in that note. And it's hard to explain what it is without seeing it and giving it away, but it really is important to know that the richness of the design is really important.
Okay.
You know, one thing when we were starting this campaign, and I spoke to people, they said, well, why don't you just write to the president and have him make this bill? And for me, it was like, no, everybody has to be involved in this conversation so that we understand. And you might remember the Republican primary thing where the like name a woman that should be on it, and people were saying Margaret Thatcher, their mother, Mother Teresa, because they don't even know any women that they could name. And you know, that's what we're trying to highlight here, is to know these women and their contributions, especially Harriet Tubman, because as Karen has said, she is foundational. We would not be having a United States of America, I don't think, unless her bravery which was really fundamental in that unification, you know, or of winning the war. And so I think that the grassroots aspect of this is, and that this is a continuing conversation. When the Susan B. Anthony coin came out, it was just like, you know, put out there, and people were like, is this a quarter or what is it? And who is it? It was like really not the kind of educational program that will go along with this new series of bills, which is, you know, as Kate has described before. And that is really the, you know, there will be a lot more education, a lot more conversation, and more things that it reveals.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that we would want to learn more about Tubman, because she really practiced a liberation theology. I mean, everything was not rosy for her up in Auburn for those 50 plus years, because as women were getting the vote, and she was one of their chief advocates, and she was, you know, she knew that as a property owner, she was obligated to pay taxes. She wasn't going to get the vote. That was for white women. Okay, but she saw something greater. She had a vision of America where all women one day would be able to have the vote, which is why she was able to still champion the suffrage movement, knowing that it did not include her, That was why she was comfortable with she dealt with the struggle that Black men began to lose their opportunity for the vote with the 15th Amendment, that states began to take that away as suffrage became a reality. You know, she understood the complications, but she had, you know, I think the thing that gives me great hope is that if America could get back on a footing where we could deal with issues of parity and equity as a liberation tool, there is no comfort in trying to, I don't, to make yourself feel better means to put someone down. There is no comfort in that.
Mm.
Tubman understood the bigger piece of this is that everybody can share in the bounty of this land. And that's not being Pollyanna. That is the absolute truth, is how she absolutely felt. And
That is
if we,
legend.
yeah, yeah, we need to really explore that further. And it is also one of the reasons why Frederick Douglass could tolerate an Elizabeth Cady Stanton who referred to Black people as Sambo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he stayed in her house for a time, and he eulogized her. You have to understand that this currency is a chance for America to become free.
Yeah.
Okay, it is a reckoning. It is an opportunity, and I hope we see it that way.
Yeah. So we have two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up because we're close to the 4:30 hour. So I'll just post these two questions. One is from Kimberly Coyman, another student. Do you think that if they put Tubman on the 20, there should be details that surround slavery? And then the other final question is from Dan Broyle. His question is, Tubman is not a national figure. How does a U.S. bill address her life in British Canada for 7 years? So those are the two final questions.
She was in Canada because of the Fugitive Act, and you know, she wanted freedom. That's where she was exiled, but she was definitely a national figure, born in this country, and she fought for this country.
Right. So I think the first question about the slavery, of course, that should be part of the whole educational and the discussion around Harriet Tubman being on the bill. It's finally a recognition that this country had slavery. You know, it'll be in everybody's face every single day. So I think that that's a big component of the legacy and the story of Tubman. And as far as Tubman is not a national figure, I'm not getting that, Dan. Of course she's a national figure. And she spent time in Canada because, as Barbara said, she had to leave because she was a quote unquote fugitive during the 1850s. So I think that story of how she was able to live in freedom in Canada is really important, and that should be part of the discussion as well. But her heart and soul was back in the United States, and her family and everyone she loved in Maryland and in New York. And that's where her heart was, and that's where she ended up settling and spending the last 50 years of her life.
I would also just add to that I don't think it's an either or issue. She's both a national figure and an international figure. And a transnational figure. I'm thinking of your article that you wrote for my special issue, Dan Broyle, on Harriet Tubman and transnationalism. I think it was really valuable, but I don't think that has to be an either or at all, because she is both local and global. There's a statue of her in Ghana where her people were from. So, I think that there are many ways that people can claim Harriet Tubman. So, on that note, though, it's 4:30 and I am going to wrap up. So I just want to thank all of you, all of our panelists, and I want to also thank all of those of you who attended today's virtual event. And hopefully you can join us for our next panel next month. And enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the rest of this Women's History Month that's wrapping up this week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.